like and subscribe to our channel so you don't miss any of our upcoming videos. Hi, I'm Brianna.
And I'm Jim.
Welcome to our channel where we repair and restore vintage air-cooled cars and motorcycles.
Join us as we tackle everything from simple repairs and issues to complete restorations. In this video, we're going to talk about the diesel heater that we have in Lucy, the Adventure Bus, and we're going to show you some tips and tricks for maintenance, end of season maintenance, or if you have a problem when you're out camping and you need to get the heater working again. We'll show you how to take it out of the bus, how to disassemble it, how to clean it, and how to put it back in. And I've used upgraded clamps on this heater because I do not like the clamps that come with the unit. They can leak. On the intake, that's not a big deal, but on the exhaust, it will cause carbon monoxide to get in your vehicle. I'll show you these clamps that I use. You can use something similar, but these are much better and give a much tighter fit and a much tighter seal than the cheap clamps that come with the units.
We're going to have two different videos for the heater. We're going to have one video that talks about disassembly and cleaning the heater, and then the second video is going to be for reassembling and reinstalling the heater.
It's much easier to do this in two videos rather than having one video that's almost an hour long. We figured splitting it in two parts is probably the best option. So here is part one. This is a self-contained version of the heater. There's also one that has the heater and the fuel tank separately. I personally use the self-contained in the bus because during the summer months I take it out. Only have it in here about half the year, so it's just more practical for me to be able to take everything out just at one time and put it all back in together. It doesn't take up a whole lot of room. It's never been an issue with space, so this is the one that I prefer to use. To take it out, you actually have to loosen the fuel cap so that the cover will clear the opening, and then there are 4 latches to release on it and the cover will come off.
It's hooked on this one?
Okay. Put the fuel cap back on so we don't have any spillages. Here you can see there's the fuel tank, the fuel pump, and then the heater itself down here. And the connections for the clamps, please excuse the shadows, the connections for the exhaust and the intake are under here. Now that we've got the heater out of the bus and the covers off of it, we'll show you how to disassemble it. Normally I like to have the diesel fuel ran down to where there's very little in the tank. It just didn't work out that way this time. I have these vice grips that I made for changing fuel filters on the bus and changing fuel lines. What I did was grind off the teeth on it so I can squeeze the fuel line without damaging it.
On both sides?
On both sides. So what I'm going to do is put the clamp on the fuel line right here, and then I can take the fuel line loose from the fuel filter, and the only fuel that should come out is the fuel that is in the line from the fuel pump on. So we'll see what happens here. Okay, we only lost a few drops, and we're going to take the fuel tank and set it outside just in case we have a few leaks.
Now we're going to disconnect the fuel pump, and then we're going to disconnect all these wires.
Okay, the fuel pump has one connector, and to release it, you simply pull the clip and it will disconnect. So I usually set the wire clip aside so we don't lose it, and we're good with the fuel pump. We can then disconnect the line from it, which normally it's stuck after being on there for a while. Sometimes you have to pry it. occasionally you have to cut it. I have cut them before, and I actually have new fuel line to go on here, so it won't matter if actually we did have to cut the fuel line. There's not a lot of slack in these. Okay. It has a release right here, but sometimes it doesn't want to come off. It takes a little persuading. There we go.
There you go.
Okay, so we have that disconnected. The next step in disassembling the heater is to remove this panel, but we also have to disconnect the wiring on it as well. And this is the wire for the control panel on the front of the heater. It also has a disconnect, and then you can remove
This panel.
take the wire through it, and all of your wires
And the line.
and the line come through here. Okay. So now we have 4 bolts that have to come off that actually hold the heater to the chassis, and then we have the fuel line on the bottom which needs to come off. So we will remove these 4 bolts, and then we can take the heater off. One other thing that I need to take off
Is the clamp.
is this clamp which holds this, which I use to direct the heat within the bus. If we're driving, I'll direct it toward the front. If we're camping, I'll direct it toward the back to keep it warm back there. And one thing I'll mention when we put this back together is, you see where the fuel line connects right here? Make certain it's not up against your exhaust. You can see all the soot built up in the exhaust, but you don't want your fuel line laying against the hot exhaust. That won't end well. If you have a standalone unit, you probably have it mounted in your camper or bus. Have this unit mounted with these 4 bolts using the same method. So what I'm showing you on cleaning this would apply to the self-contained or the remote units as well. Okay, now if we simply lift this unit out, then we have the actual heater itself. To disassemble the heater, you simply unscrew this, and this mechanism will come out. This is your heater. You can take the entire unit out. You have to pull this rubber gasket off, and you'll notice that it's a little dirty working on these, which is one of the reasons that I'm using an old towel, because it does get a lot of soot and residue on. It's also the reason I'm doing the work with my hands and Brianna's holding the camera.
I'm not afraid to get my hands dirty.
She doesn't want to get sooty. So when you do this, this unit will actually pull out. There we go. Now, this is your actual heater. This is what does the work. And on the heater itself, you have the fan which blows air across the fins on the unit, which picks up the heat. This is where your heat comes from. You have a glow plug right here, and I'll show you how to change that. There's an atomizing screen under the glow plug that should be changed every season, if not more often. You have a circuit board here, and you have the connections, and then once we get all of this stripped off, I'll show you how to take this thing apart. And you will need to order some gaskets. eBay I found is the best source for gaskets. The ones I bought from Amazon were not the right size. I think they were for the German heater. Even though they said it would fit it, they didn't. So you will need a metric Allen wrench. I believe that's a 4mm or 3.5. I'll get that in just a minute and we'll look at that. They will tell you you need a special tool to take the glow plug out, and you actually do because of the wiring. Most of the kits that you can buy with the glow plugs include a wrench. I've seen some videos on YouTube where people will take a plumber's wrench and modify the socket and make it work, but for the amount of time it takes, if I can buy the kit that's already got that in it, I just as soon buy it. So that's up to you. Either way, you can make it work. To remove the connections from the circuit board, you simply disconnect them, squeeze and disconnect. There's two on one end of the circuit board, and on the other end of the circuit board there is one more. Okay, one of these goes to your high limit temperature sensor, which is right here. And that goes to one end of the board. All of these have 4 plugs, 3 plugs, and 2, so you can't get them mixed up. They have to go in the correct location. Yeah, so you're good there. All right, so let me get a couple of wrenches. Let's take the circuit board off and then we'll start disassembling the unit. Okay, the screw for the circuit board is actually a 3mm Allen wrench. So remove it.
And then squeeze this.
Yeah, squeeze that and the circuit board will come right off. There we go. And keep the screw with that so I don't lose it. Alright, now the glow plug, you have this boot that goes around it. Pry it out, and there is your glow plug. And as you can see down in there, any wrench that you use to remove it has to have a slot to clear those wires.
Yeah.
So
I got it. Oh wait, Jim, I can't hold it. I'm afraid to get my hands dirty.
very funny. A lot of the kits that you buy on eBay for the glow plug will come with the wrench as well. It's not a bad investment to have the wrench. Like I said, there are some YouTube videos on how to make a wrench, but you've got to decide if it's worth your time to do it. You'll notice the slot to clear the wiring, and set the wrench on the glow plug like so. So put a screwdriver through here and turn.
Ow.
Once you've got it loose, you can simply unscrew it using the wires. And this is the glow plug. And this one is actually about 4 years old. It still works. It's not bad. I will save it for a spare since it still works. But while we've got this thing apart, I'm going to go ahead and replace it. Now, down in there you can see a screen. It's called an atomizing screen, and it atomizes the fuel as it goes across the glow plug. Now they'll tell you you need a special tool to take that out. However, a number 2 pencil, the eraser, is almost a perfect fit, and you can put it down in there and generally get the screen to come out. Sometimes it's a little tricky, but all you gotta do is try it a little bit.
Well, if you hold it for a few seconds.
Let me turn it over this way so gravity will help. Yeah, that's just about out. And then I can take some needle nose pliers.
See how we did that?
Once you get it loose, take some needle nose pliers, grab it, and it will come right out. And you can see how dirty that atomizing screen is. When they get dirty, it restricts the fuel flow. And if you have a lot of smoke when you first start the unit up, that a lot of times is an indication of insufficient fuel, and a lot of times you can trace that back to the atomizing screen. There's also another thing that happens with these heaters. They do not like to run for short periods of time. These heaters like to run for hours. And in our case, Lucy doesn't have any heater boxes, so this heater is the sole source of heat for the bus. So what happens is that if you turn it on, turn it off, turn it on, turn it off a lot, it actually ends up building up a lot of carbon or soot in the combustion chamber, and that will really affect the performance of the heater. It will also keep it from starting like it should. So I'll show you what this looks like when I take it apart. So next we'll remove the 4 bolts that hold the end of the heater on. These allow access to the combustion chamber, and this is where the internal fan is that blows air into the combustion chamber and blows the exhaust out of the unit. Now there are 2 gaskets in these heaters, and one of them you're almost always able to reuse if you wanted to, but one of them will almost always tear up when you take it apart. So I just buy several sets of gaskets and keep them on hand so that if I'm out on a camping trip and have to work on the heater, I have gaskets to be able to take it apart and put it back together. So this simply lifts off.
Okay.
And you can see this is the gasket that almost always comes apart. This is the fan that blows the air over the combustion chamber and it goes out the exhaust. This is what allows the unit to run and produce heat. And always clean all this old gasket off just like you would on an engine when you're working on it. And you'll need to get the gasket off so that this can come out along with your fuel line. This is where the fuel comes in and goes into the atomizing screen, which fits down in here, and the glow plug screws into here. So we've got 4 more screws in here that have to come out. These are shorter than the other ones if you need a way to just reference keeping them separate. Okay, now this mechanism will pull out along with this fuel line, and this has very little soot buildup compared to what I've seen many years in this thing, but you can see some in there. You can see some around here, and if you look down inside the unit, let me get a flashlight.
Yeah, it's very dark.
Yeah, let me get the flashlight. Okay. And if you look down in here, you can see the soot buildup in the combustion chamber. This actually is not bad compared to what I have seen it sometimes. The previous year, I ran the heater for sometimes an entire weekend without turning it off, and it was actually the cleanest that I had ever seen the unit when I took it apart at the end of the season. This is kind of typical of what you will have. There's several ways to clean this out. One, you can take a brush, you can take paper towel. I wouldn't put anything wet down in there until you've got it almost clean, because what happens if you spray a solvent or anything down in there, it turns into the messiest concoction you've ever seen and you get it on your hands, it's just about impossible to get it off. So either wear gloves or get as much out as you can with a brush with it dry, or be prepared to get messy if you get it wet. Now, I'm going to share with you a trick that I do, which is cheating, but it works, and that I use the glass beads in my sandblast cabinet. Fine glass beads do a really good job of cleaning this out. The only thing you need to be careful of is to tape off all of the threads so that you don't get glass beads down in the threads and stop them up. Yeah. So take your gaskets off, get the threads taped up so that you don't mess up those, and you can glass bead it if you have a cabinet or a shot blast facility. Here is a shot of the combustion chamber with all the tapped holes taped up and ready to bead blast. We'll put it through the glass beads and we will show you the results on cleaning that up.
So this is what the housing looks like after it's been bead blasted. I don't know if you can see.
Yes.
It looks a lot cleaner than it was. And this is the combustion chamber after it's been bead blasted. Can you see in there?
Yeah.
It's a lot cleaner than it was before. We had soot trapped all the way in the bottom of that. Make sure to watch the video for part 2 to see how we reinstalled it and reassembled it.